My husband called me broken at dinner and no one corrected him. My name is Lena Hartwell, and that sentence landed like a glass breaking on tile. We were at his father's long table, the one his mother polished every Friday. The good china stood around us like witnesses. The Hartwells liked their meals formal, even when the talk turned cruel. I had learned to fold my napkin into a perfect square, to sit with my shoulders gentle and my voice lower than my thoughts. I had not learned how to swallow a word like broken. Graham said it with a soft laugh, as if it were dust on his sleeve. He was telling a story about the early days of our marriage, about my panic attacks and the time I sat in the hallway at 3 a.m., counting the lines in the floorboards until morning came. He wore his success like a coat, tailored and expensive, and he liked to hang it where others could see. Lena is better now, he added, cutting his steak. She was a little broken back then, but I fixed it. The table hummed with polite noises. His sister glanced at her plate. His mother poured more wine. His father chewed. I felt the line inside me pull tight. My therapist had taught me to breathe through shame, to name it and set it down. I named it humiliation and placed it on the white linen. Graham's hand touched mine lightly. It was a gesture for the room, not for me. I stared at the candle between us. Flame, wick, wax. 3 parts, like past, present, future. In the past, I loved him for the way he could enter a room and make the edges soften. In the present, he was telling a story about me as if I were an object he had mended. For the future, my chest felt like a locked drawer. On the way home, I asked, "Why that word?" He turned the radio down. "It got a laugh," he said. "People understand drama." "I am not a story you tell for applause," I said. He glanced at me, amused. "You're too sensitive." "We're fine, Lena. Everyone knows you had a rough patch." It makes me look devoted. I watched the city pass, window by window. A woman held a baby. A man watered a plant. A dog stared at us from a balcony, yellow eyes bright. Life moved in small, honest gestures. Ours had become a performance. At home, he kissed my cheek and went to his office. I stood in the kitchen, hands on the counter, the tile cool under my bare feet. I could hear the faint rhythm of his typing behind the door. I picked up my phone and stared at my therapist's last message. "You are allowed to require respect," it read. "You are allowed to tell the truth." I padded down the hall and paused by his office. He hated interruptions when he was writing or talking to clients. The door stayed shut, the light at the bottom a thin gold blade. I saw my reflection in the dark glass of a framed diploma. My face was calm. My mouth was set. Broken is something you throw away, I thought. I am not disposable. The kettle clicked. I made tea with careful hands, and as the steam rose, I felt the first spark of a quiet decision. I did not yet know what it would become. I only knew that the story he told at dinner was coming to an end, and I would be the one to write the next line. The next week settled into a brittle routine. Graham woke early, ran 5 miles, and sent breezy emails from the kitchen island. He liked to take calls on speaker when he knew I was nearby, his voice warm with professional confidence. He would turn to me between clients, delivering little notes about my day as if he were my manager. "Remember to call the contractor," he would say. "And don't push yourself. We don't want you backsliding." I smiled tightly and made lists anyway. I went to therapy, I went to the grocery store, I repaired the fence in the back garden with a borrowed hammer. Small jobs steadied me. The smell of new wood, the click of screws setting flush, the quiet dignity of work done well. My hands remembered themselves. At the Hartwells' next family dinner, Graham told another story. This time it was about our budget during the pandemic and how he handled everything while I read books in bed. "She used to cry at the news," he said, cutting a roll. "I mean, we all did. But she really cried." He raised his eyebrows, and his father chuckled. I felt my chair shrink beneath me. No one asked what I had faced privately. No one asked who had held him through his own famine of certainty. The Hartwells collected outcomes, not process. On the ride home, I tried again. "When you call me broken, it gives permission," I said. "It tells people how to treat me." He exhaled as if he were tired of a child's question. "People treat you fine," he said. Your sensitivity is a choice. You could be grateful. Grateful. The word stuck. Gratitude is a light you switch on, not a leash you hold. I grew quieter, then careful. I watched how he arranged the narrative in every room. If a problem appeared, he framed it so he was the solution. If I asked for help, he called it a hurdle and showed his jump. Our marriage had become a workshop where he displayed his skill, and I was the broken chair made sturdy by his hands. I stopped offering him the softest parts. Instead, I woke before dawn and walked. I memorized the neighborhood block by block. A black cat slept on a red stoop. The corner bakery opened at 6 with the same 2 women in aprons, one singing under her breath. I bought coffee and a plain croissant, sat at the window, and wrote in a notebook without apology. My handwriting loosened, then opened. One morning, I saw our neighbor, Nora, wrestle a box down her steps. She was a paralegal at a small firm and lived alone except for a ficus that refused to die. I jogged over and lifted the other side. "You're a saint," she said, out of breath. "Just a neighbor," I said. The box was full of case binders. She laughed, and we slid it into her trunk. We talked on the curb, light scraping the tops of the cars. I said nothing about the dinners or the word, but I said, "Do you ever feel like your life is a thing someone else edits?" "All the time," she said. Then I remember I signed the release form. After she drove away, I stood in the quiet street and felt the scale inside me tip by a single grain. I went home and cleaned the office while Graham was out. I dusted the shelf where he kept his leather notebooks, the ones he believed made him look serious. I lined them in a neat row. One stuck against the wood, and when I pulled it free, a small digital recorder slid forward and tapped the desk. I touched it once, then stepped back as if it were warm. My pulse climbed. I did not press play. I set it exactly where it had been and left the room as if from a church. In the kitchen, I rested my hands on the counter and counted my breaths, a practice my therapist used for emergencies. I wasn't in an emergency. I was in a slow choosing. I would not rush. I would pay attention. I would find the truth, and I would hold it carefully until it could stand on its own. I waited 2 days. In that time, I acted as if every object in our home contained a secret, and my job was to disturb nothing. I was a curator of quiet. On the 3rd morning, when Graham left for a client meeting and the house settled, I returned to the office. The recorder sat where I had placed it, harmless as a key. I pressed play. His voice filled the room at once, intimate and unguarded. He had recorded a call with his best friend, Mark, a week after our last family dinner. "She's finally manageable," he said, almost cheerfully. "You know how she used to spiral. Now she's grateful. The therapy bills were worth it. I've got her in a good lane." There was laughter on the other end. He continued, a little proud. "I keep her away from anything stressful. Money, family plans, the house. I handle that and she does the small stuff. She likes lists. It makes her feel useful. If she starts pushing, I remind her how far she's come." My mouth went dry. He spoke like a man describing a system, not a person. He used words like leverage, optics, narrative. I listened to him rehearse a version of me that fit his story, and I understood why the dinners felt like courtrooms. He was building his case in rooms I did not enter. Broken had become a tool. I kept listening. Another file clicked on. It was a recording from a day at my therapist's office. I heard my own voice, fragile and sincere. "I'm learning to ask for what I need," I said on the tape. "To speak without apologizing." The room hummed softly, mic hissing. Then my therapist asked a question, and I answered with care. The session ended. After, I heard the door sound from the hallway, and then, faintly, Graham's voice. He had recorded me through the wall, or perhaps he had placed the device in my bag before I went in. He said later on another file, "It's not manipulation. It's data." I paused the recorder and set it down gently, as if it could bruise. The office window showed a clean slice of sky. A bus sighed outside. I sat in his chair and felt the weight of a decision settle over me like a coat I had chosen and paid for with my own money. I lifted the recorder again and scrolled. There were more files. One was a dinner with his parents, recorded in the car. Mom eats up the savior stuff, he said. Dad respects the efficiency. It keeps Lena in line without a scene. In 6 months, I'll have her ready for the next step. What's the next step? Mark asked. Kids, he said casually. Once she's steady, we'll start. The story will be perfect then. She was broken, I fixed her. We built a family. It plays well. It plays well. Something inside me stopped pleading. A room in my chest, long locked, released its latch. I did not cry. I stood and walked outside into the thin, autumn sun. Nora was returning with a bag of groceries. I raised a hand. Do you have time? I asked. My voice was clear as glass. She set the bag on her stoop and listened while I told her the clean parts, the parts you can say in daylight. I did not describe all the back rooms of humiliation, or the nights I lay still to keep the peace. I told her about the recordings. Her face tightened. That's unlawful in a lot of contexts, she said softly. But more than that, it's cruel. I don't want a war, I said. I want truth, seen and heard. I want my voice back in my own mouth. She nodded. Then let's plan something that doesn't need shouting, she said. Let the evidence speak. You stand there and breathe. We sat at her kitchen table and made a list. A lawyer she knew who preferred quiet settlements. A small speaker I could borrow. A day to choose that meant something. The Hartwells had a family brunch coming up for Graham's father's birthday. The house would be full, but not loud. People would be seated. Stories would be told. A table is a stage if you bring a light. I went home and placed the recorder back where it had been. I watched the office door. When Graham came in that night, he glanced at the shelf, saw everything as he left it, and kissed my hair. You're good, he asked. I'm learning, I said. Good girl, he said softly and walked past. I felt the coat of resolve tighten. I counted to 10. Then I breathed. I was not a girl. I was a woman learning the exact temperature of her own name. The morning of the brunch, light fell across our bed in long pale bars. I rose early and dressed in a blue dress I had worn once to a small concert. The night a violinist made a room hold its breath with one note. I wanted that feeling. Not drama, not spectacle. A note held cleanly in the air until the silence itself spoke. Graham whistled when he saw me. Perfect, he said. Let's try to keep things simple today. I like simple, I said. We arrived to a house arranged like a photograph. Flowers, the smell of coffee, his mother's pearls. Conversation rose and fell in gentle arcs. I placed the small borrowed speaker in my bag beside the wrapped gift. My hands did not shake. Nora texted me once from her own brunch across town. I believe you, she wrote. You owe no apology to the truth. We sat. Toasts were made to the patriarch, a man who loved to be honored but preferred the praise to look accidental. Graham stood to offer his story. He lifted his glass. Dad taught me to solve problems, he said, smiling. He showed me how to take responsibility for the people you love. I watched him. He was handsome, persuasive, already arranging the air into a narrative that curved around him like a ribbon. He reached for my hand. Lena has been a blessing, he said. She went through a hard season and we came out stronger. Don't, I said quietly. The room paused. He blinked. Don't what? Don't name me for the table, I said. I brought something instead. There was a thin silence. I stood, set the speaker in the center of the table, and placed the recorder beside it. The candlelight made the metal look almost pretty. My voice did not rise. Graham, I said, I found your recordings. Color left his face, then returned. His smile held. Lena, we can discuss this later. We will, I said. But not alone. I pressed play. His voice poured into the room, familiar yet suddenly strange. He spoke about lanes and leverage, optics and narrative. He described me as manageable. He said the story would be perfect. The Hartwells sat very still. His mother's hand found her pearls and stopped there. His father's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on the table. I let the words run their length. I did not watch Graham. I watched the candle. Flame, wick, wax. When the file ended, I played the session outside my therapist's office, my voice like a younger sister. I spoke of learning to ask for what I needed. Then Graham's voice came from the hallway, calling it data. I stopped the tape. No one moved. In that clean stillness, the truth stood upright without my help. I had not argued. I had not raised my voice. I had not called him names. I had offered exactly what he had made, and it spoke. He finally said, small, "You weren't supposed to hear that." "I was supposed to live it," I said. His mother looked at me with something complicated, part pity, part clarity. His father cleared his throat. "Son," he said, measured. "That was ugly." Graham's eyes were pleading, then angry, then careful. "I was under pressure," he said. "I said things to blow off steam. Everyone exaggerates." I folded my hands. "You called me broken," I said. "You built a stage to keep me there." I picked up the recorder and placed it back in my bag. "The show is over." He reached for my wrist. I stepped back, and his hand closed on air. "We can fix this," he said. "We'll craft a response." "We won't craft anything," I said. "We will tell the truth. I'm moving out for now. Nora can connect me with counsel to handle the rest quietly." His parents did not stop me. His sister met my eyes, wet with something like apology. I kept breathing, calm and steady. I set the wrapped gift for his father on the sideboard. "Happy birthday," I said. Then I left the room as if leaving a church, steady head high. Outside, the air met my face as if I had been underwater and was finally breaking the surface. The door closed with a sound I will carry for the rest of my life. Not a slam, not a click. A final measure ending, then silence. I moved into a small sublet with tall windows and a narrow balcony that barely fit a chair. The first morning, I stood there with a mug and watched a neighbor hang laundry, bright shirts lifting. The city woke gently beneath me. A bus hissed. A bicycle bell rang like a tiny declaration. The light found my bare forearms, warm and ordinary. I did not feel triumphant. I felt precise. Nora came by with a plant and a folder. "From the attorney," she said. "Options, timelines, language. Nothing loud." We sat on the floor and ate grapes from a bowl because I had not bought plates yet. I thanked her. She said, "It takes nerve to choose stillness when everyone expects a shout." I slept that night without clenching my teeth. My dreams were simple and domestic. I rearranged a drawer. I folded a shirt. I turned a key in a lock that finally fit. In the morning, I went to the market and bought what I wanted, not what would look wholesome on a list. I bought hard pears and a wedge of cheese and a wooden-handled brush I did not need. I walked home and cleaned the small kitchen until it held the quiet I deserved. Graham texted twice that week. The first message was long and polished. He wrote about regret and context. He did not say sorry. He said he had spoken to his parents, that the situation was salvageable with the right framing. I did not reply. The second message was shorter. It read, "I miss you, and I want to fix this." I looked at the words a long time and felt nothing expected of me arise. I set the phone down. At therapy, I told my therapist I had played the recording. She listened with her patient hands folded. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Clean," I said. "Not light yet, but clean." "You chose to let the truth stand without argument," she said. "That is a discipline." I nodded. It felt like setting a stone where a stone belongs. We talked about next steps. Not dramatic ones. Practical ones. Finances, boundaries, exit from the house. What to do with the garden bed I had planted in spring. I would go back one afternoon when Graham was out and collect my things. Nora would be nearby. I was not afraid. Fear had been replaced by focus. When I returned to the house, I paused in the hallway where his voice had once leaked under my therapist's door. The office smelled the same, paper and cologne, but the air was different. The recorder still sat on the shelf, as if waiting for its next assignment. I placed it in a small box with the other objects he could keep, and I labeled the box in neat letters. I packed my books, my tools, my grandmother's mixing bowl, and the blue dress. I left the candle holders. I left the leather notebooks. I left the story he had written, still half finished, because it was his to abandon or defend. Before I left, I walked to the back garden. The fence I had repaired stood straight. The rosemary I planted in April had grown thick and fragrant. I pinched a sprig and held it under my nose. I thought of the dinners, the careful place settings, the way I used to measure myself against a table that did not see me. I set the sprig on the dirt, a small green flag over ground I would not return to, at least not to kneel. Life did not become a montage of perfect mornings. Instead, it became a steady series of honest ones. I paid bills. I returned to work part-time at the bookstore, reshelving novels and talking with regulars about endings that felt earned. Children pressed their hands to the glass and smeared the sun. On Sundays, I called my mother and listened to her talk about her hydrangeas and the way the blues surprised her every year. I walked again in the early light and recognized the corner bakery by its song. Months later, I met Graham in a quiet office with a lawyer present. He wore a suit that tried too hard. He apologized this time, not with performance, but as if the word had a weight he was willing to hold. I believed I was the hero, he said, looking at the conference table. I liked that version of me. We all like our best pictures, I said. But we owe each other the undeveloped ones too. My voice was even. I did not need him to cry. I needed the papers signed. We signed them. Back in my apartment, I opened the windows and let air move through the rooms. The plant from Nora had taken root. Tiny new leaves had unfurled, pale and brave. I brewed tea and watched steam ribbon toward the ceiling. I was not broken. I had been bent toward someone else's light, and now I was turning toward my own. In the evenings, I sometimes took the recorder from its box, not to listen, but to remember the shape of what had changed. I held it like a smooth stone, and then put it back. The proof had done its job. The absence of argument had been the loudest sound. I understood now that dignity is not a costume. It is a posture your spine learns, and once learned, it resists being unlearned. I went out to the balcony as the city softened into evening. Someone below laughed. A radio carried a song I didn't know. I watered the small row of herbs and watched droplets cling to each serrated leaf, bright and ordinary as mercy. For the first time in a long time, my name felt safe in my own mouth. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.